Welcome to the Elokus channel. This is class number 6 in the discourse Lecha Anashim, which is the 5th discourse in the great book, Bishosh Egdimu 5672. And we will begin right now, in a moment, chapter 19. Making headway, making progress. Chapter 19, which is the second chapter in the 5th discourse. So here we go. We were holding by the summary of the last chapter, so let's do a quick summary of Perek Yud Ches without explaining too much. You can listen to the last 2-3 classes to get the in-depth version of what we learned, but just a kitzer. Kitzer is a summary. Again, the chidush, the main point of chapter 18 was to explain that the tzimtzum, the contraction that happened in the Orein Sof before the tzimtzum, that happened in the infinite light that was present before the tzimtzum, is not completely the same, totally on all of the Orein Sof. Since we have developed the idea that there are 10 hidden spheros in the Orein Sof, which kind of then establishes that there is a higher dimension of the Orein Sof, where the Orein Sof is to the full extent Ein Sof, fully Ein Sof, fully without an end, and therefore utterly simple and beyond particular Sephirot. And if there are Sephirot over there, it's Spheros Enkates, it's without an end Sephirot. And then there is a lower element to the Orein Sof, once the Orein Sof has slightly modified to become a source for 10 particular spheros. Therefore, the tzimtzum that is blocking the Orein Sof is different in regards to the inner element or the higher element of the Orein Sof. Over there we learned that tzimtzum is thorough, complete. It erases everything, and there's no trace at all from what was before. However, the tzimtzum that is the contraction, that it relates to the element of the Orein Sof, that is the source of the Kav, which is the hidden 10 spheros, from that level of the Orein Sof, the tzimtzum is not as dramatic, not as thorough. It is what he calls not a tzimtzum b'derech siluk, not a contraction in a way of complete removal of what was, but a tzimtzum b'derech miyut, a contraction that just diminishes it. Of course, it has to diminish it, because in order to produce the kav, it has to be greatly diminished. But this level of the Orein Sof that has already, so to speak, somewhat of a relationship to 10 spheros, doesn't have to be completely erased to produce the kav, but rather it leans into the kav, albeit through a dimming, but not through a complete removal. So with this, he also in the beginning explained how the concept of why we're saying, why the Eitz Chaim suggests, at least in the question, that God didn't have to remove. Why did he have to remove the Orein Sof? He could have left the light of the Kav just present. And he asked, how is that possible? And explained, since we understand that in the Orein Sof there is already a source for the Kav, then maybe that should have been left present. Now, again, the Eitz Chaim says it was dimmed, but still he says, even though the Eitz Chaim says it was dimmed, the dimming, however, in this element is dimming and not removal completely. So let's read inside the Kitzer, and then we'll continue in chapter 19. In chapter 19, he's going to begin the explanation of how was the Kav drawn from the 10 spheros agnuzais, from the 10 hidden spheros that are in the Orein Sof. What's the relationship? What kind of tzimtzum was there? But first he's going to go into a long explanation. What are these 10 hidden spheros? And how do they exist in the Orein Sof? We need a lot of light shining upon that to give us an understanding how it can be, on the one hand, Orein Sof, and on the other hand, it's already considered a source for the Kav, and we speak of 10 spheros, albeit hidden over there. What does that mean? So that we're going to get much better explanation in chapter 19. But let's first do the kitzur, the summary here. The implication of the Arizal in Eitz Chaim, the Gilui HaKav, that Hashem could have revealed the Kav. Gam Belisha Yis'alama or Legamri, even without the light being completely hidden. That was the Mashmas Eitz Chaim. And the reason the Eitz Chaim says in the end God did remove the light, it's only to produce the Kalim, right? But the Kav itself could have remained. Moving up now, and it's this Eitz Chaim will be understood. He explained in chapter 18, based on what we said earlier, that the Kav draws is drawn. Yes, we said yesterday, Chazer Veheir, that the Kav is a reintroduction of the Orein Sof, but from the lower element of the Orein Sof, not from the higher element of the Orein Sof. It has the Kav has a designated source on its own, and that is the 10 hidden spheros that is in the Orein Sof. V'rak, however. Why? But yet we still needed a complete symptom. Why? When the Orein Sof was fully revealed, what does he mean, the revelation? When the Orein Sof before the symptom were shining, then the 10 spheros hagnuzos was not noticeable at all. These 10 hidden spheros that are in the Orein Sof were not recognizable at all. And therefore, of course, there needed to be a removal of the Orein Sof. However, based on this, it would have been sufficient enough for the Orein Sof, the higher element of the Orein Sof, to hide. And you can leave over the 10 spheros hagnuzos, which are the root of the Kav, and just have that left over. Why do you have to have a tzimtzum that hides the entire order, all the light? V'atirutz, and the answer that he gave was, and that Arizal gives, that is for the sake of the producing of the kalim, of the vessels. That as long as the lights were on, the vessels were not able to be produced. But from the perspective, from the perspective of the light could have remained just, you could have had the light of the kav. Now, once we say that in the end, for whatever reason, let it be for the production of the vessels, we needed to erase the light completely. But for the kav, for the light itself, for the beam of light, it wouldn't have been necessary. We could have just left that over. That could have been. However, after all considerations, in the end, God did remove it completely. If so, the kav then comes from after a complete blockage, after a complete shutting off of the light. If so, he asked the question in the discourse, how can the kav then be considered a continuation, meaning a giluy helam, just revealing of what was there before, seems to be totally cut off. That's why he explained at the end of chapter 18 that the tzimtzum, as it relates to the 10 spheros hagnuzos, is not as thorough and complete, is not the same as that very same tzimtzum is affecting the Orein Sof. That's what he's going to explain here. And even though the kav at the end is also only came about through the tzimtzum. According to this opinion, which is again the shita, the opinion of the Eitz Chaim, the shoyresh hakav me'esa spheros hagnuzos, that the root of the kav is from the 10 hidden spheros, hatzimtzum b'shvil hakav. So the tzimtzum that happened in order to allow for the kav to be, for the line to be, for this thin thread to be, hurak b'bchinas miyut, is only in the level of reduction. It's not a complete removal. The Orein Sof itself, the higher element of it, needed to be completely removed. But the Esa Spheres Hagnuzos, yes, in order to produce the Kalim, we had to hide that as well. But it was enough to make that much less It didn't need to be completely obliterated completely. And on the contrary, we do want it to stay because we want the kav to be a continuum of that, of the Or Ein Sof, as we discussed. So now let's take a look in chapter 19. The Inyanu, to understand the relationship of the Esa Spheres Agnuzais, of the 10 hidden spheres, to the Kav, that's going to emerge after the Tzimtzum, and to understand what kind of Tzimtzum there was regarding these 10 hidden spheres. For that, we need to get a better understanding of the 10 hidden spheres. How does these spheres relate to the Or Ein Sof? In this Bar Le'el Perek Tezvav, because we explained earlier in chapter 15. Again, we're holding chapter 19. And the crux of the idea that there is Esa Spheres Agnuzais was in chapter 15. In chapter 15, we explained that the root and the source of the Kav, as it was included in the Or Ein Sof. Remember, we say that the Kav is not a new light, we discussed yesterday. It's a re-emergence of the old light, which means that hypothetically, whatever comes out later was first once included in the infinite light before the Tzimtzum. It was Kol in the Or Ein Sof. Yet, when we say it was Kol in the Or Ein Sof, was it completely the same like the Or Ein Sof, or was it contained within the Or Ein Sof, but it is already, in a sense, a little different? And that's where he's going to tackle over here. As it was included in the Or Ein Sof, Yesh Sham Esa Spheres. It has 10 spheres. So, in a sense, it's not like when we speak, there is Or Ein Sof, then there is 10 spheres that are hidden in the Or Ein Sof, and then there is the Kav, and then the Kav comes forth from it. All it is Kav. The Kav that later will come out after the Tzimtzum and be introduced into the black hole and become the powerful force that will transmit life and energy to every single feature in the cosmic in the cosmic evolution. Every world and every world will all be powered by the Kav. So this Kav, since this Kav is a Kav of Or Ein Sof, so if you trace this Kav back into the pre-Tzimtzum light, the Kav itself, as it is embedded in the Or Ein Sof, that's the Esa Spheres Agnuzas. That's the 10 hidden spheres. So as he says over here, Shakol b'Or Ein Sof yesham Esa Spheres. When the Kav is included in the Or Ein Sof, there is 10 spheres as part of this ray, but it is lost in the Or Ein Sof. Then Esa Spheres Hagnuzas, and these are the 10 hidden spheres, b'matzilon, that are incorporated or hidden in their emanator. So we need to understand, what does this mean, this hiddenness? The Inyan Shem Gnuzos Venalamois B'Or Ein Sof, and the idea when we say that they are hidden and concealed and hidden in the Or Ein Sof, Hainu, what does that mean? Shehem Klulim, they are incorporated in Yuchadim Boy and completely unified with him. She'enon b'bchinas mitzios la'atzma. They're not in a state of existence for themselves. If we would enter into the Or Ein Sof before the Tzimtzum, we wouldn't be able to see that in addition to the Or Ein Sof, there are 10 flavors over there, or 10 unique energies. It wouldn't even be noticed at all, because they're so benign and so unidentifiable that they are perfectly unified with the Or Ein Sof. That they should be, even though they exist, that's the paradox over here. They're there and they're not there. As he says, they're not in a metzius la'atzman, metzius nekares b'fnei atzman. That they should be in a state of a recognizable existence for themselves, b'metzius chachma bina. That they should be in a metzius, in a state of existence of wisdom. The 10 spheres are chachma, bina, wisdom, understanding, chesed, kindness. When they exist in the Or Ein Sof, they're not in a state where you can point to it and say, here is chachma, here is wisdom, and here is bina, and here is understanding, and here is kindness, and here is judgment. We don't see that at all. And therefore, because they are not detectable and noticeable, that's why they don't add anything to the Or Ein Sof. It's not the Or Ein Sof plus. They don't add, God forbid, any multiplicity, but Or Ein Sof Baruch. That in the Or Ein Sof we should be able to point to multiple powers. They don't add any riboy, any pluralism in the Or Ein Sof. And the Or Ein Sof remains singular and one, perfectly one. And Kamoy HaNefesh, and the example for this would be Kamoy HaNefesh, just like the soul. All the powers that a person has that later functions in a person's life, in which each power, we're going to see soon, finds its own vessel and its own container in order to register in that particular container and in that particular vessel. Like the power of vision registers in the eyes, the power of speech registers in the mouth, and each particular function and power finds its own vessel. Yet we know that all these powers are really soul powers. And when they are in the soul itself, so when the soul is not inside the body, then the soul is carrying all these powers, all these potential powers. But then you can still notify, because the soul, when it's in an experienced state in heaven, it still emanates these powers. But if you are to go to the source of the emanation, trace these powers all the way back into the soul itself, the soul carries all these powers, yet the soul is not a composite of many things. The soul is not a puzzle pieced together from a bunch of powers. The soul is one single being. And yet the soul contains within himself all these powers. But all these powers are in a state of absolute unity with the soul. And just like the soul, that incorporates within all the powers. But nevertheless, the soul is one, not like the body. The body is one body, but the body is clearly a composite from different things. The body is pieced together. There is a heart, there is a brain, there are lungs, there is a digestive part, the stomach, and all the colon, the liver. These all different parts, the hands, the arms, the feet, the fingers, everything is, so the body is one, but it's still a harakava. It's still an integration of many things. But the soul is not that way. The soul is a singular entity, completely one. Yet it contains within itself. Well, how do you know it contains the powers? Because where do the powers come from? They come from the soul. So the existence of the powers when they're in the soul are in a non-existent state. Super cool. They exist, but in a non-existent state. So if this is so regarding a soul, can you imagine how much more it is regarding God? So to the Esespheros, do not add a plural state to the Or Ein Sof. Now, and he's going to draw that from, make what we call a Kal V'chomer, that the powers of the Esespheros, the Oros, the lights of the Esespheros, before they go into the Spheros, when you trace them back into the Or Ein Sof, they definitely don't exist in an identifiable way where each one is noticeable and each one is presentable in its own. Each one is in conflict with the other. Like there's different powers and different energies noticeable in the soul, and he's going to derive that from a Kal V'chomer. A Kal V'chomer is we're going to see it that even something that later becomes so much more defined, which are the vessels, the containers. From God, eventually are going to come the lights, and he also produced the vessels. Now, we learned earlier that the vessels, they also have a source in the Or Ein Sof. Ultimately, everything traces its way back to the Or Ein Sof. The vessels have a source in the Or Ein Sof. What is that? Remember, we learned these were the letters of the Rishimu. The traces that after God made the Tzimtzum, there were leftover Rishimu traces that were there. Those traces are the source of the vessels. Like we had a long discussion about it. Now, those letters of the Rishimu weren't born after the Tzimtzum. They existed pre-Tzimtzum. But in the pre-Tzimtzum, they weren't noticeable. They were all included in the Or Ein Sof. Like we discussed earlier, it's the power of God to limit, the Koach HaGvul that the Or Ein Sof has. God has a self-limiting power, and that was the power of the Rishimu. That was in the Or Ein Sof. And we call them Oisi Rishim, that they're some kind of letters. So what do we think? Those letters before the Tzimtzum, those letters were actual letters? You can find A, B, C, D, or let's not say A, B, C, Aleph, Beis, Gimel, Dalet. You can find these letters inside the Or Ein Sof. There is an element of letters there. For sure not. But yet we say they exist. They're rooted in the Or Ein Sof itself. But like, remember we said then that they're not called the Metzios. They're not in existence at all. They're completely unified with the Or. There's no other substance over there. They're pure. They're completely unified. So therefore he's saying like this. If the Kalim, which are so much chunkier than the light, the Kalim that are so much more substantial than the light, when I mean substantial means they have so much more of somethingness than the light, even their origins, when they are in the Or Ein Sof, their origins are not pronounced. Their origins are so refined and so elegant and so abstract and so unsomethingness that they don't add anything to the Or Ein Sof, and all there is the Or Ein Sof. The Or Ein Sof doesn't have crumbs inside of it that are the origins of the vessels. There aren't any pieces floating in the Or Ein Sof that eventually are going to become the vessels. But it's all Or, it's all part of the Or Ein Sof. How much more so the source of the lights, which the lights compared to the Kalim, remember we learned that the lights are called Beli Ma, without substance. The Kalim are called substance. The lights are without substance. Yet we learned that when the lights go into the vessels, they become a little bit more substantial. The lights start getting a little bit more design, right? They get more specified and colored. But even then, they are Beli Ma, without substance. And definitely before they go into the vessels, they're Beli Ma, they're without substance. And definitely when these lights are still in the Kav, remember the lights of the 10 spheres originate in the Kav, they are for sure Beli Ma, without substance. And how much more so when these lights are in the Or Ein Sof before the Tzimtzum, for sure they don't have any substance, they don't have any somethingness to them. But yet we're saying that the 10 spheres hagnuzos are considered a source, that there is 10 hidden spheres, and they're considered a source. There is something there. It's called a shoresh. It's not like it's not there. It's not just a potential of God to have this. That we said is a higher level. That's spheres in kates. That's where the spheres are without a kates. There's no particular this or that. But here we're saying no, there's a particular narrowing down to 10 spheres. So something is, but yet they definitely don't have substance at this point. So they exist in a non-existent state, as we shall still discuss. But he's deriving it. If even in the vessels we see that their shoresh, their root, when they are in the Or Ein Sof, it's not chunky, it's not something. It's one with the Or Ein Sof. Because so too we said is even in the root of the vessels, as they exist in the Or Ein Sof, the source of the Kalim are not in a state of existence. God forbid. It can know as it is known the Oisius Rishimu, that the letters of the Rishimu as they exist before the Tzimtzum, they're not in a metziut, they're not in an existence of letters at all. And as it is known in what it says in Zohar, Golov Galifa, which means he carved out letters b'tihari Allah in his supernal purity. So these letters that are in the purity, imagine carving out letters in the air. Okay? Take your finger and carve out in the air an A, a B, and a C. So even though you made an A, a B, and a C in the air, is there an A and a B and a C? Yeah, you formed it. You just motioned the motions, tracing the outline of the A, the B, and the C in the air. But did you make a dent in the air? Did you change the air? The letters exist and they don't exist, right? So that's the Gal of Glifa B'tihari alone, the supernal purity. On a level of absolute purity, over there Hashem is carving the letters, but they're, in what sense are the letters separated? They're not. But yet he carved them. So it's imagined like, it's almost like the letter that exists, the A that exists in a white paper in the middle of the page before you even wrote the A. So is the A there? It's hypothetically, yeah. If you later, I gave this example. If later you cut out the A, the shape of the A, so the A was always there, but was it there or wasn't there? It was just white paper. So similar, that's kind of where we're getting at. It is and it's not. But if we say that regarding the source of the vessels, which are far more shapely and far more defined and far more something, definitely when it comes to something that is so much less something. The root of the light, which they are without substance. Lights don't have substance. Lights are pure. Lights are abstract. So for sure that in the Or Ein Sof they don't have any identifiable existence over there. Umemela move on. So the next stage then comes out. If they don't exist with a definable existence there, that would also mean that they're all unified. That the Chachma and the Bina and the all 10 are all together. It's not like each one is separate over there. Because if each one is separate, it means that each one is existing in an existence. They don't have any divisibility. That Chachma should be an attribute on its own. Ubina Sfira Levada, and Bina should be a Sfira on its own. Since in their essential existence, they're not in a state of existence, so automatically, therefore they are in a state of iruv, mixed, va'achdos, and they are also in a state of unification. They perfectly are harmonized one with each other. It's even hard to say that, because again, he's not saying they don't exist at all, because that would be a level higher than the 10 spheres agnuzos. Higher than the 10 spheres agnuzos, there's just potential, just yocholes. That's not called existing. Here we're saying that the power is already present, but its presence is so refined and so elegant that it doesn't occupy its own space and its own existence. It can share its space with everything, even things that are totally opposite from it. And all the 10 spheres can all be one together, even though they are different. And some of the spheres are opposites from each other, as he's going to explain in a moment. Chesed and Gevura, total opposites. Chesed is water and Gevura is fire, total opposites. But yet they're together. So this will have to do, in order to, it's a paradox. They are and they're not. They are, that's why we say they're present, but they're not, that's why they can all be together. They are together, not that there's just nothing there. You can say there's nothing. There's just plain non-coloring. No. There are. It's all the colors joined together as one, not no colors. That's his question that he asks. How is it that we say that there is 10 spheres over there? Then there are complete opposite madregas, opposite levels. Like chesed and gevura. Chesed and gevura are like fire and water. Chachma and bina gamkein. Chachma and bina are also opposites. Chachma is more water and bina is more fire. Not going to get into it right now. Ube'emes. And therefore, how can they then be together. So this is what he's going to discuss in this chapter, the existence of the Eser Sfiris Agnuzos, how they exist. And then we'll understand how the Kav was drawn from them, how did it evolve, what's the lowering of it, what's the change that takes place as a result of the Tzimtzum on this stage of existence. Because here we're dealing with the various different stages that brings nothingness into something, into non-beingness into beingness. So then we're going to trace this slowly through the entire process. Okay. As Hashem will continue in the next class. Thanks, and let us see Mashiach today.